The chartered jet lifted smoothly from the runway, its engines humming a steady, confident song beneath the passengers' chatter. Sunlight filtered through the oval windows, casting warm rectangles of light across the plush seats. Among the 30 or so travelers on board, most were business people tapping on laptops or scrolling through phones. A mother clutched her young daughter's hand. A man in a tailored suit flipped through a newspaper. A couple whispered about their plans in Miami. It was just another mid-morning flight, calm, routine, and unnoticed. 10-year-old Elijah Turner settled into his window seat as his mother, Tanya, adjusted his little keyboard on his lap. The keyboard was one of those compact models, with just enough keys for simple tunes, but light enough for a child to carry. She smoothed the folds of his crisp white shirt and brushed a loose curl from his forehead. Elijah's dark brown eyes shone with quiet excitement. He had practiced the piece he planned to play on this flight for weeks. To him, the hum of the engines was like another musical instrument, a bass note that made his own melodies richer. Tanya offered him a nervous smile. "Ready, baby?" she whispered. She had flown many times for her work in arts education, but this flight felt different. She knew Elijah's talent, but she also knew how unpredictable air travel could be. Seeing her son settle in gave her a small comfort. Elijah nodded. He loved to perform, but he also loved routine. He placed his little headphones in his ears and tested each key. Click, tap, click, tap. He heard the small electronic ping of each note, and his smile widened. All around him, passengers stowed bags in the overhead bins and settled into their seats. Flight attendants in crisp Navy uniforms moved down the aisle with practiced grace, checking seat belts and reminding people to switch devices to airplane mode. At first, the flight felt perfectly smooth. Clouds drifted past the window, a bright canvas of white against a clear blue sky. Below, the patchwork of farmland stretched into the distance. Elijah watched the world move by like a slow movie, dreamy and peaceful. He felt safe. He always felt safe when music was near. Even the low rumble of the cabin felt like a friendly companion to his piano keys. Then, without warning, the jet shuddered. A sudden dip made Elijah's stomach flutter. He gripped the edge of the keyboard, surprised. A chorus of gasps rose from the seats ahead. The flight attendants paused mid-step, eyes widening. Behind Elijah, someone's coffee cup trembled on the tray table and sloshed over the edge. A chill rippled through the cabin as everyone realized this was no ordinary bump. Tanya's hand found Elijah's shoulder. "It's okay, baby," she said, her voice firm but gentle. She glanced at the ceiling panels, streamed with flickering lights for a heartbeat, and back at Elijah. "Just take some deep breaths." She hoped her calm would reach him. Elijah closed his eyes for a moment and inhaled. He felt the metal frame of his seat solid against his back, the straps of his seatbelt snug across his hips. His heartbeat pounded, but his mind focused on the upcoming melody he had practiced so many times. He pictured the notes floating in order, a path of sound he could follow. To him, that path was a lifeline. He clutched the little keyboard with both hands and allowed the tremor of the plane to become part of the rhythm. The jet shook again, more violently this time. Overhead, bins rattled and snapped shut. A young woman across the aisle grabbed the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. The passengers' mutter turned into nervous murmurs, and even the flight attendants exchanged worried glances. Turbulence of this intensity was unusual on a well-planned charter flight. Elijah opened his eyes. He saw his mother's face, pale but determined. He looked ahead and saw the flight attendant, Medora, checking straps on a nearby seat. Midori caught Tanya's eye and offered a small, reassuring nod. Despite the crew's calm professionalism, the passengers' fear was rising, like hot air. Elijah felt something shift inside him. He no longer thought of the turbulence as something to fear. He thought of it as part of a huge orchestra, each tremor a beat, each roar of engines a drum. He twisted the volume knob on his keyboard quietly. Just a click audible over the rattling walls. Then he lifted a finger and pressed a key. The note rang out clear and gentle. It was the first tone of the simple Mozart piece he had practiced. The sound was small, but confident, a bright drop of water in a storm. Passengers turned in their seats, startled. Some frowned in confusion, Others exhaled, curious. Dory paused in her rounds. Even the flight attendants in the galley stopped, strapping down equipment to listen. Elijah played the next note, then the next, each one measured and sure. He reached into his well-rehearsed memory of the piece. C, D, E, D, C. Each key press felt like placing a stepping stone across a rushing river. As each note sounded, the panic around him softened. The man with the coffee looked up, his frown melting into surprise. Mother soothed her crying toddler, her voice quiet but firm. Tanya's shoulders relaxed, just a fraction. Elijah's music was rising above the roar of the shaking plane. More turbulence rattled the cabin, stronger this time. The jet lurched downward, and the overhead bins rattled. Everyone gripped something, yet Elijah did not stop. He leaned into his music. He closed his eyes again, but this time he smiled. He felt the connection between the tremors and the melody. He knew that every note he played was not just a sound, but a promise that calm could follow chaos. Some passengers pressed their palms against the seat backs or held their partner's hands, but they listened. They listened to a 10-year-old boy whose small keyboard sounded impossibly brave. The turbine noise was still there, undeniably loud, but it became the background to something more beautiful. It became the canvas for a story of courage. Elijah's little fingers danced across the keys, moving into a gentle arpeggio, it's flowing in a soft, rising wave. He thought of his music teacher's praise when he first played the piece perfectly. He thought of the day he auditioned at the community center and how proud his mother had been. He thought of every time he had played in front of a small audience, always a bit nervous, always hopeful that people would hear what he felt in his heart. None of those moments compared to this, but he felt ready because of them. Behind the melody, the jet's engines roared. The plane tilted, as if the sky itself were testing its wings. A flight attendant gripped the rail by the front door of the cabin. Her eyes glimmered with both worry and wonder. Even she could not help but listen. Passengers craned their necks, forgetting for a moment where they were going or why they were. In that moment with Elijah, sharing his music, Tanya placed her hand over her heart. She had flown many times, studied turbulence charts, and prepared for emergencies. Still, she had never felt so frightened. But seeing her son play calmed her more than any briefing she had ever sat through. His music told her everything would be fine, that fear could be faced with a simple act of beauty. She leaned close and whispered, "You're amazing, baby." Elijah opened his eyes and saw his mother's proud face. He nodded, then returned to the keys. He unfolded the next phrase of the composition, a melody that rose gently and then fell like a bird landing on a branch. The plane's movement seemed to soften, as if it were listening to. Passengers' heads nodded slowly in time with the music. Infants settled against their mothers. A businessman lowered his window shade just to see the little pianist playing by the light. Then the jet gave one final tremor, a long roll that seemed to stretch forever. A collective breath held in the cabin. Elijah played the last note of his practiced piece and held it. The note lingered, clear and calm, until it faded into the background noise of the engines. Silence followed. The plane steadied. The fear that had gripped everyone seemed to loosen, like a tight fist opening. Passengers exhaled in relief. Some whispered prayers. Some offered each other uncertain smiles. But all of them turned toward Elijah, whose small keyboard rested now in his lap as he looked around, a shy, proud smile on his face. He had calmed a turbulent cabin with music that belonged to him alone, but was shared with everyone. In that moment, 10-year-old Elijah Turner understood something new, that fear could be faced with a single, clear note, and that a child's gift could become a lifeline for many. I said. And as the plane found smooth air again, Elijah closed his eyes, still listening to the echo of his own courage. The cabin fell quiet after Elijah's last note faded. A soft hum of engines replaced the clatter of panic. Passengers exchanged stunned glances. Some reached for their phones, unsure whether to call loved ones or share the moment on social media. Elijah sat very still, his small keyboard resting on his lap. His hands trembled slightly with pride and relief. He had done more than calm himself. He had brought calm to everyone around him. Behind him, Tanya brushed a tear from her cheek. Her heart swelled with wonder. She remembered the fear she had felt seconds before, the tight knot in her chest. Now, seeing her son's gift at work, she felt a surge of joy. She turned to the man beside her, a banker in a dark suit. His face was wet with tears, too. He offered her a shaky smile and whispered, "Thank you, your son saved us." Tanya nodded, unable to speak. Midori, the lead flight attendant, moved through the aisle with a gentle confidence. She checked on the elderly couple in row 12, then knelt by a mother soothing a terrified toddler. The child's trembling stopped when Midori hummed the same Mozart melody under her breath. The little boy's eyes widened and he reached for Midori's hand. Midori patted his tiny fingers and guided him closer to his mother. The woman glanced at Elijah and gave a grateful nod. In the galley, flight attendants whispered among themselves. They had learned emergency protocols and safety drills, but none taught how to handle hearts gripped by fear. They watched Elijah's calm presence and felt their own nerves ease. They adjusted drinks and snacks once more, this time serving them with gentle smiles. Coffee cups and water bottles were placed on tray tables carefully. Even the steadiest crew member felt a warm pride that they were part of creating this moment. High above, behind closed doors, billionaire pilot Marcus Hawthorne gripped the yoke of the jet. He had flown across oceans and through storms, but he had never felt so moved in the cockpit. His expensive training had given him skill, but it was Elijah's music that had given him perspective. He signaled to his co-pilot, who slid into his seat. Marcus pressed the intercom button and spoke in a calm, measured voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. If I may, I'd like to invite the young pianist in 5A to play another melody for us. Elijah, can you share one more?" Song. A ripple of applause rolled through the cabin. Passengers clapped softly, careful not to disturb the fragile piece. Tanya's eyes widened as Marcus called her son by name. Elijah felt his cheeks flush. He had never played on an intercom before. He looked at his mother, whose encouraging smile said, "Yes, you can." He pressed the power button on his keyboard and stood carefully in the aisle. With each step, he felt the soft carpet under his feet and heard the slow clap of hands from strangers. He clutched the keyboard to his chest as if it were a precious gift. He reached the front of the cabin. Midori and the other attendants stepped aside to make room. A hush fell again. No one spoke. All eyes were on Elijah. Took a deep breath and settled his keyboard on the arm of an empty seat. Then he pressed the first key of a gospel tune he knew well. The opening chord was full of warmth, the same sound he heard every Sunday at church. It was a melody of hope and praise, perfect for lifting tired hearts. The first notes drifted up the aisle, gentle and strong. Passengers closed their eyes to listen. Tears formed on eyelids as they remembered better times, shared joys and personal struggles. A businessman in a dark suit bowed his head and prayed silently. A young woman gripped her partner's arm, feeling comfort from the familiar tune. Even the usually reserved flight attendants felt their eyes sting. Elijah's small hands moved over the keys with surprising confidence. He had practiced this song countless times at home, imagining an audience of friends and family. This was different. He was playing for people he did not know, people who only moments ago feared for their lives. Now they sat enraptured by his song. He thought of each note as a message. You are safe. You are not alone. You are heard. In the cockpit, Marcus closed his eyes and listened. He felt the melody resonate through the fuselage, as if the plane itself were vibrating with the sound. He thought of his own childhood, of the music lessons he abandoned when he chose finance over art. He remembered his father's smile when he played the piano. A tear escaped, sliding down his cheek. He pressed the intercom button again, his voice soft. "Thank you, Elijah. Your music reminds me of what really matters. Keep playing." In the cabin, a ripple of emotion spread. A woman in business attire dabbed at her eyes. An older man in a wheelchair tapped his foot in time with the rhythm, a tear rolling down his cheek. An infant in a mother's lap reached out as if to touch the notes in the air. The cabin shimmered with quiet unity. Strangers found comfort in shared emotion. The fear that had gripped them vanished, replaced by awe and gratitude. Elijah reached the chorus of the song. His fingers flew as he played the uplifting melody. He felt warmth in his chest, a joy that made him forget the rattling plane. He looked toward the back of the cabin and saw Tanya beaming. She whispered encouragement, and Elijah nodded. He poured his heart into the final phrase, stretching the notes until they soared and then softened like a bird gliding home. He ended on a single, clear chord. It lingered in the cabin, a final promise of peace. Passengers exhaled in relief. A few moments of silence passed before the cabin erupted in applause. Hands pounded on armrests and walls. People cheered, some wiping tears, some hugging neighbors. Even the flight attendants clapped with genuine delight. Elijah blushed and lowered his head, hiding his shy smile. Then Marcus's voice came over the intercom one more time. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Elijah Turner, our youngest in flight, musician. On behalf of the entire crew and this aircraft, thank you for sharing this moment. We have just reached smooth air, and we expect to land in Miami in about 2 hours. Enjoy the rest of your flight. A cheer went up, louder and more joyful than before. People returned to their seats, still buzzing with excitement. The banker whispered to Tanya, "You have a star on your hands." Tanya laughed softly, tears still in her eyes. "He's just my baby," she replied, her voice thick with pride.
Hush.
She looked at Elijah, who settled back into his seat, his legs swinging with relief. He lifted his headphones and gave a small wave to the passengers behind. They waved back, some standing to give him a thumbs up. In the galley, flight attendants hugged each other. Midori whispered, "I've never seen anything like that." Another attendant nodded, "Me neither. We should make this a standard safety procedure, come that little pianist." They laughed quietly, still in awe. Elijah closed his keyboard and tucked it into his backpack. He looked out the window. The sun painted the clouds in pink and gold. The plane glided smoothly now, the worst of the turbulence behind them. He felt a gentle breeze through the slight gap in his window sill. He smiled, remembering how he had turned fear into music. The cabin returned to normal flight service. Drinks and snacks circulated again, but the atmosphere had changed. Conversations now buzzed with excitement. Strangers introduced themselves. People shared stories of lives saved by laughter, by music, by kindness. A sense of community lingered in the air, binding everyone together. Elijah leaned into his mother's shoulder. "Mom," he whispered, "did I do okay?" Tanya pressed a kiss to his forehead. "You were amazing, baby. You did more than okay." She held him as the plane cruised over the ocean. In that moment, Elijah felt something new, understanding that his music could heal and unite. He closed his eyes, listening to the steady pulse of the engines and the gentle murmur of gratitude all around him. He had not only calmed a turbulent cabin, he had touched hearts. And as the plane flew toward the setting sun, Elijah Turner knew that this journey was only the beginning of a life led by music and compassion. The applause died away, leaving a warm hush in the cabin. Passengers settled back into their seats, faces still bright with wonder. Even the engine's steady roar sounded almost gentle now. In the cockpit, Marcus Hawthorne leaned back in his. Cherry pressed his hand to his chest, as if he could still feel Elijah's last note echoing inside him. His co-pilot, Alina, glanced over with a smile. "That was something else," she said softly. Marcus nodded, his eyes glistening. He could not remember the last time he had felt so moved at 35,000 feet. Elijah sank into his seat, heart still racing from the second round of music. He looked at his mother, whose eyes were full of pride. Tanya squeezed his hand. "You were wonderful," she whispered. Elijah ducked his head, feeling both shy and proud. He had calmed dozens of fearful hearts, yet in that moment he felt small again, just a boy with a keyboard. A flight attendant approached with 2 cups of juice. "For our little hero," she said with a wink. She set one glass on Elijah's tray table and handed the other to Tanya. Tanya smiled and thanked her. Elijah took a sip of orange juice, its cool sweetness soothing his dry throat. Around him, passengers exchanged glances and whispered words of thanks to Tanya, Some even reached out to pat Elijah on the shoulder. A businessman said, "Son, you saved our nerves." "Thank you," Elijah managed to nod. Da-da-da-da-da. As the flight continued calmly, Marcus decided to take a moment to meet his young musician. He tapped the intercom button once more. "Elijah, would you mind coming up here to the cockpit?" His voice was gentle but carried over the cabin. The boy's eyes widened, looked at his mother. "Can I?" he asked quietly. Tanya nodded. "Go ahead, baby. I'll be right there." Elijah slipped from his seat, clutching his little keyboard. He moved carefully down the aisle, pausing twice to offer shy waves. Passengers waved back enthusiastically. The lights in the cabin felt brighter, friendlier. Some people rose slightly to let him pass. He made his way to the flight attendants, who cleared a path to the cockpit door. The moment felt like stepping onto a stage. But this was no ordinary stage. It was the place where the pilot steered a giant metal bird through the sky. Marcus met Elijah at the cockpit door. He crouched down to the boy's level and offered a warm smile. "Elijah, that was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard up here," he said, gesturing toward the controls and instruments behind him. "Would you like a quick look at where I sit when I fly this plane?" Elijah's eyes shone. "Yes, please." He followed Marcus inside. Alina, the co-pilot, slid her seat back and patted the empty chair beside her. "Make yourself at home," she said kindly. Elijah climbed into the seat and gazed at the dials and screens. He pressed a finger gently to the throttle lever, as if testing it. "This is where you control the fuel to the engines," Marcus explained. Elijah nodded, as though he understood perfectly. Marcus pointed to a small plaque near the window. It read Flight 345, New York to Miami. "We've flown this route many times," Marcus said. "Today you helped make it special," said Elijah. Turned to look out the windshield at the fluffy clouds drifting by. He placed his hands on his lap, still a bit awed by the technology surrounding him. He glanced back at the cabin, where Tanya and passengers watched through the little cockpit windows. He felt a warm glow of pride. He realized that he had not only calmed them with music, but had also become part of something large, a team that carried people safely through the sky. Marcus reached into his leather flight jacket and pulled out the signed logbook. It was a heavy book with thick pages. On the front was embossed his name in silver letters, Captain Marcus Hawthorne. He opened it to a blank page and handed Elijah a pen. "Would you like to write your name here so we can remember today?" Elijah took the pen carefully and scrawled his name in large, uneven letters, Elijahturner. He looked up at Marcus, whose eyes were soft. "Thank you," Elijah said in a small voice. Marcus ruffled the boy's hair. "Thank you, Elijah," he said. "You're welcome here any time." Back in the cabin, the atmosphere remained charged with excitement. Passengers whispered about the bond they now felt with each other and with the young pianist. A woman in the back row asked Tanya, "Does he play often?" Tanya smiled. "Every day at home. But this is his first time playing on a plane." The woman's eyes widened. "Well, I hope he plays again someday," as Elijah settled back. Into the co-pilot seat, Marcus reached over and flicked a switch on the control panel. A gentle chime sounded in the cabin. Marcus's voice came clearly through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to open the cockpit door so you can see where Elijah is sitting now." The door slid open, revealing the cockpit to curious eyes. Passengers leaned forward, some taking photos with their phones. Children stared in wonder. A hush fell once more as Marcus lifted an index finger and pointed to the boy. "This young man is part of our crew today," Marcus announced. "We call him our musical first officer." Laughter and applause rippled through the cabin. Tanya mouthed "You're amazing" to Elijah, who waved shyly at the cheering crowd. His small wave looked almost regal in the glow of the cockpit lights. Alina returned to her seat and quietly prepared the flight plan for the descent into Miami. She glanced at Elijah, who watched her with curiosity. "Would you like to see how we plan our landing?" she asked. Elijah nodded eagerly, showed him a tablet screen with a map of the coast and a green line marking their path. She explained in simple terms how they followed this line to guide the plane safely to the runway. Elijah listened closely, absorbing every word. Marcus stood and moved to the center of the cockpit. "Elijah, I want you to know something," he said softly. "Every time I fly, I feel a great responsibility. But today, your music reminded me why I chose this job. It's not just about moving people from one place to another. It's about care, courage, and making connections. You have those qualities in your music." Elijah looked up, his eyes shining. He nodded, understanding more than his words could say. The plane began its gradual descent as Florida came into view. Below, the turquoise water of the Atlantic Ocean gleamed in the afternoon sun. The coastline spread out like a long ribbon of sand and green. Passengers returned to their seats, fastening seatbelts again. But the mood was light. People whispered about how the view was extra special, perhaps because they felt a shared closeness after Elijah's in-flight concert. Back in the cabin, Midori moved through the aisle with renewed energy. She handed out tiny souvenir wings that Marcus had brought from the cockpit. Each wing was a small gold pin engraved with Flight 345. Passengers accepted them happily, pinning them to lapels and shirt collars. A young couple took a selfie, holding their wings and beaming. Grandmother in row 14 pinned a wing to her grandson's shirt, smiled shyly, clutching the pin. Elijah watched all this from beside Marcus. In the cockpit, felt a happy flutter in his chest. He had never imagined a day like this, playing for strangers, calming a turbulent cabin, meeting a billionaire pilot, and now seeing souvenirs given out in his honor. This was more than he had ever dreamed. In the final moments before landing, Marcus turned to Elijah once more. "Would you like to play one last note as we touch down?" he asked quietly. Elijah's eyes lit up. He pressed a small button on his keyboard hidden under his jacket and played a single. Clear note middle C. The sound was small and pure, carried through the cabin intercom as a gentle farewell. Passengers clapped again, soft and warm. Landing was smooth, as if the plane itself wanted to honor Elijah's note. Wheels touched the runway with a gentle thump, and the crowd in the cabin gave a small cheer. Marcus taxied the plane to the gate with care, then shut down the engines. A final announcement came through. "Thank you all for flying with us today, and thank you, Elijah Turner, for sharing your gift." As the doors opened, the passengers rose, lined up by rows, and filed out. They turned back to offer final waves and thumbs-ups to Elijah. Tanya stood at the door, holding her son's hand. They walked down the jet bridge together, the crowd around them buzzing with happy chatter. Outside the terminal, cameras flashed. News crews had heard about the extraordinary flight and were waiting to interview Elijah and Marcus. The reporters asked Elijah how he felt when the plane shook. He answered simply, "I played my music, and it made everyone calm." When they asked Marcus what inspired him to invite Elijah to the cockpit, he replied, "His music reminded me that kindness and art can steer us through the storm." Later that evening, back at a quiet hotel, Elijah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He could still hear the echo of applause. He could still feel the pull of the sky outside his window. He thought of all the faces he saw today, some fearful, some grateful. He thought of the pilot and how his voice sounded when he spoke over the intercom. Elijah closed his eyes. He knew that his life would never be the same. He had shared his gift with the world, and the world had shared its wonder back. And somewhere in the night sky above Miami, the jet engines rested silent, carrying a story of a 10-year-old pianist whose music had moved hearts, perhaps the greatest journey of all. The sun had just begun its climb when Elijah and his mother stepped out of the airport terminal into the warm morning air. A small crowd of reporters and cameras had gathered. Their bright lights and microphones pointed straight at the 10-year-old pianist who had calmed a whole cabin with his music. Tanya held Elijah's hand firmly, guiding him through the throng. She could feel her son's heart pounding, but his steps were steady. He carried his little keyboard bag over one shoulder, as if it were just another school backpack. Reporter, with a bright blue microphone, called out, "Elijah, how did you feel when the plane shook so badly?" Elijah paused, looking up at her. He thought about the moment the cabin lurched, how his own fear had turned into a simple decision. To play. "I was scared at first," he said softly, "but then I remembered my music. I played what I knew, and it helped everyone calm down." His honest, gentle words made the camera lights shimmer on his dark eyes. Another reporter asked Marcus Hawthorne to share his thoughts. The billionaire pilot still dressed in his crisp uniform, stood beside Elijah and Tanya. He smiled warmly and said, "When I heard Elijah's music, I knew our flight crew did more than fly a plane today. We helped bring comfort." Elijah reminded us all that kindness and art can guide us through fear. His deep voice carried calm confidence, and the cameras focused on Elijah's shy grin. After the quick interviews, a black SUV rolled up. Door opened, and a kindly lady stepped out. Dr. Maria Santos, director of Sunshine Children's Hospital. She reached for Elijah's hand and said, "Would you like to come with me to the hospital? The children there would love to hear your music." Elijah's eyes lit up. He looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, baby," she said. "Let's go share your gift." Inside the SUV, Elijah sat between Tanya and Dr. Santos. The city passed by in a swirl of pastel buildings and swaying palm trees. Elijah could hardly sit still. He imagined the children waiting for him, some lying in beds, others in wheelchairs. He felt a flutter of nerves, but then he thought of the calm he felt when he played. He closed his eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. He was ready. At Sunshine Children's Hospital, a group of young patients and their families gathered in. The bright lobby. Balloons in cheerful colors floated near the ceiling. A banner read, "Welcome, Elijah Turner." A nurse pushed a boy in a wheelchair to the front. He tapped his chin and asked, "Are you really the boy from the plane?" Elijah nodded and gave a small wave. The children clapped in excitement. Dr. Santos led them into a small auditorium. Chairs were set in neat rows, and a keyboard stood. At the front, Elijah approached it slowly, thought back to the first notes he had played on the plane. He remembered how music had made the plane feel safe again. Now, he had a new audience, children who needed hope and joy more than ever. He pressed the power button, and the keyboard hummed. Then he lifted his fingers to the keys and began the same Mozart piece that had calmed the cabin. The notes filled the room with gentle light. Some children closed their eyes and swayed. Parents watched tears roll down their cheeks. The boy in the wheelchair smiled so wide that his eyes nearly closed. When Elijah finished the first melody, the room erupted in cheers. Without pause, Elijah moved into the gospel tune, warm, bright chords that carried love and praise. His small hands flew over the keys with ease, guided by his simple faith in music. A girl with a bandaged arm tapped her foot. Another boy with a beeping heart monitor bobbed his head. The rhythm felt like a promise. Even when life shakes you, a steady melody can bring you peace. When Elijah played the final chord, the applause was thunderous. Children jumped from their seats, clapping and shouting his name. Nurses wiped away tears. Dr. Santos stepped forward and hugged Elijah gently. "Your music heals more than we can measure," she said. She presented him with a glittering medal engraved with a musical note and the hospital's emblem. "This is for you, our honorary young ambassador of music." Elijah's cheeks turned pink as he accepted the medal. Later, in a quiet hallway, Marcus Hawthorne found them. He had arranged a special scholarship fund in Elijah's name at the local Music Dreams Academy. He handed Elijah a thick envelope. On it was a letter saying that all his piano lessons, sheet music, and instrument rentals would be covered for 5 years. "Music is your gift," Marcus said, "and it should never be limited by cost." Elijah opened the envelope, eyes wide. He saw words that promised lessons with great teachers, chances to play in recitals, and even a path to a music college one day. He looked up at Marcus and whispered, "Thank you." Marcus knelt and placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "Keep playing, Elijah. The world needs your music." Tanya hugged them both, tears of joy in her eyes. She thought of the first time Elijah had touched the keys, of his wide grin when he got each note right, and of how shy he had been at his first recital. Now he stood tall, surrounded by love and support. "I'm so proud of you," she said. More than words can say, Elijah hugged her in return. News of the hospital visit spread quickly. Local newspapers carried photos of Elijah playing for the children. Social media overflowed with clips of his performance on the plane and at the hospital. People wrote messages of hope and gratitude. Famous Pianist even offered to send Elijah a personal message of encouragement. Donations flowed into the scholarship fund, so more children could learn music. Elijah's simple act had become a spark, lighting a flame of generosity and art across the community. That evening, Tanya tucked Elijah into bed at their hotel room. We wore the medal and clutched the scholarship letter like treasures. The city lights twinkled. Elijah closed his eyes and thought of the Dotha roar of the plane. The hush that fell when he played, the faces of children smiling back at him. He felt both sleepy and excited. He whispered to his mother, "I want to play for more people." Tanya kissed his forehead. "You will, baby. One day soon you'll play for concert halls full of people who need your music." Elijah drifted, off to sleep, dreaming of melodies that could calm storms and brighten hearts. In the quiet of the night, high above the city, Marcus returned to his penthouse. He sat at his grand piano long unused and thought of Elijah's music. He remembered the tremors of the plane and the peace that followed each note. He pressed a single key and a soft chord filled his living room. A smile curved his lips. He thought, "I will begin again tomorrow. It's just like Elijah. I will use music to find calm." And so, 2 lives had been changed. A 10-year-old boy learned that his gift could heal fear and build community. A billionaire pilot rediscovered his lost love of music and the meaning of compassion. Together, they had shown that a simple melody could bridge worlds, soothe souls, and set both children and adults on a path of hope. The journey was far from over for Elijah, for Marcus, and for everyone who had felt the magic of that remarkable day. ChatGPT said, Elijah woke early the next morning, the medal resting on his bedside table like a small, shining sun. He reached out to touch it before sitting up. The letter from the Music Dreams Academy lay beside it, promising lessons, recitals, and new friends who loved music as much as he did. He felt a rush of excitement and a gentle flutter of nerves. Today he would visit his old school and share his story, with classmates who had cheered him on and who now watched him as something more than just Elijah. Tanya knocked softly on his door. "Morning, baby. Ready for your day?" she asked. Elijah hopped out of bed and hugged her. He wore his best shirt, light blue, the color his music teacher said made his playing sound bright. They drove to the small elementary school where Elijah's journey had begun. As they approached, a crowd of students, parents, and teachers gathered by the front doors, holding handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Elijah," and "Our music hero." Inside the school gym, rows of chairs faced a makeshift stage. A small keyboard sat center stage, draped in a blue cloth. The principal stepped up to the microphone. He spoke about bravery, compassion, and the power of art. Every child listened with wide eyes. When he finished, he invited Elijah to the stage. A wave of applause followed Elijah's footsteps. His heart pounded like a drum, but he reminded himself of the calm he felt on the plane. One note at a time, one breath at a time. He sat and pressed the first key of the Mozart piece. The familiar melody flowed like a gentle river. Watched faces light up. Some children tapped their feet, others closed their eyes. Tears gleamed on a few cheeks. When he ended, the applause thundered, echoing off the gym walls. Then he began the gospel tune, letting each chord rise with hope. He thought of the hospital children, of the billionaire pilot, and of every stranger who had nodded their head or offered a smile. He played for them all. After the music, the principal invited children forward to ask Elijah questions. One shy boy raised his hand and asked, "How did you not feel afraid?" Elijah smiled gently. "I was scared," he said, "but I remembered my music. Each note gave me more courage." A girl with pigtails asked, "What will you do next?" Elijah thought for a moment and said, "I want to learn more songs and play for anyone who needs to feel calm or happy." The room burst into cheers again. At lunchtime, Tanya and Elijah sat with his classmates. They crowded around him, asking about the scholarship, about the hospital visit, about the pilot. Elijah answered each question, sometimes softly, sometimes with a shy laugh. He felt proud, but also very ordinary, a boy who loved pizza, comic books, and recess. His classmates treated him like a star, but he felt a little awkward in the glow. Still, their excitement warmed his heart. That afternoon, a local news crew arrived to film a special story about Elijah's day. They set up cameras in the schoolyard under a bright sun. Elijah played a short piece on a grand piano brought from a nearby music store. The keys felt smooth under his fingers. He thought of the little keyboard that had started it all, but he also felt happy to play on something larger. The cameras circled him, and he saw his own reflection in the polished wood. He thought, I made it this far because I trusted my music hand music, trusted me back. When filming ended, Elijah walked home with Tanya. Neighbors recognized him and waved. Some called out, "Great job, Elijah!" He waved back, feeling his cheeks warm. Neighbor handed him a small bouquet of daisies. "For our little hero," she said. Elijah accepted the flowers with a shy thank you. He placed them gently in a vase on his windowsill, the white petals glowing in the light. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in pink and gold, Marcus Hawthorne sent a message asking if he could drop by with a surprise. Elijah felt a flutter in his chest. When the doorbell rang, he opened the door to find Marcus holding an elegant leather-bound composer's self-journal. "I thought you might like to write your own songs someday," Marcus said. "This is for your musical thoughts and ideas." Elijah's eyes widened. He took the journal carefully, feeling the smooth cover under his fingers. He thanked Marcus, who smiled and said, "Keep sharing your gift." They invited Marcus in for hot chocolate and cookies. In the cozy living room, Elijah told him about the school visit, the questions from classmates, and the daisies. Marcus listened intently, as if each detail mattered deeply. He talked about balancing life as a pilot, businessman, and music lover. He confessed the scholarship fund had grown bigger than he expected. "People saw what you did and they wanted to help more kids learn music," he said. Elijah felt a gentle pride not in himself alone, but in what music could inspire. Night. After good nights were said, Elijah climbed into bed with the Compose Yourself journal on his pillow. He wrote a few words. "Today I told my classmates my story. They cheered. I played on a real piano for the news. Mike got daisies, Mr. Hawthorne. Gave me a journal to write songs." Then he opened the first page and drew a small musical note. He fell asleep thinking of melodies yet to come. Over the next weeks, Elijah began regular lessons at Music Dreams Academy. He met other children who loved music, some on violin, some on drums, some singing in a choir. His teacher, Ms. Rivera, encouraged him to compose a new piece about calm. In the storm, Elijah smiled at the challenge. He thought of that turbulent cabin and of each face he had calmed, wrote notes on staff paper, C, E, G, and then a rising arpeggio like wings unfolding. One Saturday morning, the academy held a small recital. The auditorium was full of families, students, and a few familiar faces from the hospital. Marcus sat in the front row, his arms crossed and a proud smile on his face. Tanya squeezed Elijah's hand from the side stage, took a deep breath, and walked to the grand piano. He glanced out at the audience, seeing the pilot, the hospital, director, the banker from the plane, and his classmates. He felt a warm wave of support. He played his new piece, Calm Wings, a melody woven from his own experiences. It began softly, with gentle notes like raindrops, then rose into wide, sweeping chords, like a bird soaring. Listeners closed their eyes, carried away by the music. When he finished, the audience rose in applause. Marcus stood first, clapping. Loudest of all, Elijah bowed, his heart full. After the recital, Marcus spoke into the microphone. "Elijah Turner reminds us that true courage can be found in small acts," he said. "We can all find a way to bring calm and beauty to the world." The audience cheered, and Elijah felt a glow that made the stage lights seem dim by comparison. That night at home, Elijah pinned the recital flyer on his wall, just above his keyboard. It showed him in a suit jacket at the piano, his name in bold letters, Elijah Turner, composer and pianist. He looked at that photo and realized how far he had come, from a little boy clutching a small keyboard on a plane to a young composer, sharing his soul through music. He sat at his own piano and pressed a chord. The sound filled the room, merging with the hum of the city outside. He thought of each person whose life he had touched, the frightened passengers, the hospital children, his classmates, the pilot, the teachers, and the neighbors who waved. He thought of every note yet to be written. He placed his fingers on the keys and began a new melody, soft and hopeful. The night held its breath, listening. And in that gentle darkness, Elijah Turner and his music floated free.